James, it's your turn.
Yeah, so, boys, this is, the stock crowd comes to, $2 shy up, so I'm happy to call it even.
James, we're waiting on you, man.
Oh, sorry, my dudes, you gotta trade when you can, you know. So, hang on, when did Blind Obedience hit the board?
When I cast it on my turn about 15 minutes ago.
Oh, I would have counted that. Here, let me move that to you.
Oh, please don't touch my cards with your sticky fingers! And it's all over my playmat.
Anyway, I cast Das's Oracle, ETB on the stack, cast Demonic Consultation. I win. Next game, baby. Hey, yo, Ben, want to cram some CDH? Just wipe the floor with these guys.
Sorry, guys. He's not normally like this. What's that smell? Did he... He took his shoes off, didn't he? Yep. That's fungal, for sure. Those are spores in my nose.
Hello, Commander players. Surprise, it's me talking first. I wanted to interrupt because we've got something to tell you guys.
Yeah, it's a little after recording. Walt and James After Dark.
This is future James and Walt.
Yeah,
Ooh.
it's later than the voices you're about to hear.
Yeah.
We just wanted to shout out the person who put together our fantastic new theme song.
That you just listened to.
You just listened to. It's Jaden Haladio. He's fantastic. We're so happy with what he's done for us. You can check him out on SoundCloud and on Facebook. They're in the show notes as well.
Yeah, go check him out. He's a member of our community that we play with at our local game store and is an incredible talent. And you're going to hear that incredible superhero Buzz Lightyear Space Commanders theme every single episode.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Jaden. And we'll return to our regularly scheduled content.
Back to you, past James and Walt. Enjoy.
Enjoy. A little bit. Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast by the Greensboro Commander community. It's the GCP by the GCC, helping you to have better games of Commander. I am your host, Walt.
And hello, Commander players. It's your other host, James, and I've now finished eating.
You finished your little cookie you had in your mouth before?
It was really it was a cinnamon Oreo. I had no idea they existed.
I've blown James's mind, apparently, with a new flavour of Oreo.
Incredible. Is it just a Coles? I need to go down Biscuit Isle more often.
There's like an Oreo section of the shops now when you go there. There's I reckon there's 10 to 12 flavours.
That's ridiculous.
It's getting out of hand. They need to stop.
Incredible.
Well, we're back. It's been like a long time.
We took a bit of a hiatus, which was nice, but I'm actually happy to be sat back in the studio. I'm going to call it a studio now.
The studio? We're calling it the studio.
This is our second string of episodes until we decided to take a break again. So
it's the studio now. We have professional mics.
Yeah. You can't see it, but there's a whole team of people here now. We've got a producer in the corner, sound guy.
Oh, hey, JLK. Shush, we're recording.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Prof, great to see you, man. Well, come in, sit down.
Is Post Malone coming or not here yet?
Wish. You're really pulling on my heartstrings with that.
James's eyes almost just brimmed just from the thought of that. Well, I suppose we'd better check our inbox. Oh my god, James.
That is a long list of commands. We've been away for a while.
We have been away, but look, we'd better start with the oldest one. So this has probably been sent through a little while ago, but it's there. It's an incoming transmission from the deep depths of the galaxy from the Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
Commander is a social community-focused format. Therefore, in or out of the game, players and spectators require an etiquette to ensure the success of the format.
Ooh, a non-mechanical focused episode. Walt, time to put the kettle on and talk philosophy for a little bit.
I feel like, are these normally the longer ones or the shorter ones? I can't tell.
I think the responding one is our longest one yet, but these are the ones that we get the most passionate about.
Yes.
Before we start this episode, I've noticed that the Space Commanders here have specifically said that it's a social format and it's, all that. So we're going to be talking a little bit philosophically here as well, talking about social contracts and all that kind of stuff. But I just wanted
wanted to do a little bit of a preface here and say that we play most of our Commander in a game store.
Yeah.
We play a little bit on the kitchen table or on a coffee table in a living room. So
Sometimes standing at Walt's kitchen counter.
Yeah,
That's a thing that's happened before.
Quick Pauper fire games just to test a deck before we go to Pauper. But
For sure.
a lot of Commander that we play is in game stores. So we're going to be specifically talking to game stores and a bit of kitchen table.
Yep.
I just wanted to make a bit of a note that Commander is also allowed at, official events.
For sure.
And there's also different types of Magic as well, which are like structured tournaments and stuff. And they have very specific rules, not just etiquette rules, but like you have to be on time. Your card sleeves have to be correct and you
For
can't
sure.
eat and drink. And
Unfortunately, that is not me and James's area of expertise. I hope the Space Commanders can forgive us for
not talking about that.
We'll talk about what we know, which
Yeah.
is, like mostly at the game store, also a little bit of kitchen table. But yeah, game store is basically where we play. I reckon I play 80% of my Commander at the game store. Would that be?
I'd probably say even higher. In the past month, I reckon I've played once at my own house.
Yeah, actually, that's
Yeah.
probably about me as well. Yeah, for sure. So, all right, well, that's our little focus. I suppose we should start with the kind of social contract of Commander. So this is it's something that's conceptually talked about a lot, but it's also, we'll get to it in a sec, but the Commander Rules Committee refer to this.
Yes.
This is a well-documented part of the format that we play.
Yeah, and
is the social contract.
Yeah, and if you listen to other podcasts for Magic the Gathering and specifically Commander, the social contract is not something that you would be unfamiliar with. But
No.
I think it's probably important to define what a social contract is.
Sure, start at the very beginning.
Yeah, I think it's really, because the words get thrown around a lot, but
They do.
it's actually something that's not a Magic concept. For the first time on this podcast, I think we're talking about something that's outside of the world of Magic.
Yeah, I guess we are.
So a social contract is actually a bit of a philosophical theory, actually, whereby like individuals who live together that form a society agree to abide by a set of behaviors or something like specifically laws or, generally things that are like either written in documentation like a law or just implicit. And people agree to. Like, an example that I can think of off the top of my head is when you're, like, at school. You don't just yell out the answer. You put your hand up to indicate to the teacher that you want to speak.
So that's like a structured thing, but it's also just like kind of a social contract that you are implicitly agreeing to. When you go to school, you're saying, when I'm in a classroom, I'll put my hand up when I want to talk. Is kind of the thing. Yeah, I actually thought of an example when I was reading this before, which is I was at a Savers recently. And there was a bunch of us waiting to... Savers is an op shop, by the way, like a thrift shop, if you're not from Australia.
Walt was living his best Macklemore life.
Doing all that stuff. I love going there to get the secondhand clothes, that kind of thing. The budget boy himself.
That I didn't even think of making a joke down that line. I went straight to Macklemore. That makes so much more sense.
Budgeting my entire existence. Anyway, there was a bunch of us waiting to use the change rooms because they were all full to try on our clothes and stuff. And... without anyone asking us to, we formed a queue.
Was there like one of those like velvet ropey type things?
No, not at all. There was just like a bunch of us there, and then like when someone came out, we all knew who the person who'd been waiting there the longest was, and we just like let them go in. So like no one asked us to do that. And I think this is kind of what happens with Commander is, yes, it's the social contract and the understanding of it that's like about the law and stuff, but it's also very much about the social contract we're signing that's not laid out in stone, right? It's like implicit in the format, in the way we play, but it's not like spelled out for you. It's not like you sit down to play Commander for the first time and someone goes, here's the social contract of Commander, right? You just kind of learn it as you play.
Yeah.
More.
It's funny. I think when we saw this command, I made a mention to like when you go out to a really fancy dinner or dine with royalty, you get a lesson on how to eat correctly. Like you eat with the cutlery outside in. It's mom as in palm, not ma'am as in ham, and all that, like all that kind of stuff. Like there are lessons there, but like these are things that just happen in day-to-day life, and it's been going on. This social contract, it actually the philosophical theory of it dates as far back, documented in discussion as far as Socrates.
Wow, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That seems like the kind of thing that he'd be like, hey, everyone in the town square, unwashed, famously unwashed in the town square, being like, hey, everyone, you're all signing the social contract of bathing. I'm not doing that.
Hashtag hipster, hashtag Socrates for the win.
Let's bring back Socrates. No, let's not. Let's absolutely not.
Let's definitely not do that. All right, now let's tie it into Commander and into our lives, because you mentioned before that the rules committee actually talk about this.
Yeah.
I went onto their website and it says here, each game is a social journey the players share, relying on a social contract in which each player is considerate of the experiences of everyone involved. This promotes player interaction, intergame variance, a variety of playstyles, and positive communal atmosphere.
Wow, so they really spell it out that this is the way you play Commander as it's intended. Yeah.
And if we just generally think about like Commander in general, because like if you look at the rules text, have you ever gone online and downloaded the PDF of Magic Rules?
I've never been brave enough. No.
Oh my! I was talking to a couple of our local judges, and they told me once, "Hey, just Google it and download the PDF and flick through. That's what we have to have memorized." It's like 98 pages long.
Yeah, I have seen it like linked before, and I've kind of like scrolled, and you kind of like, oh, it just keeps going.
Yeah, because when you play Commander, you already know the rules, but the social contract, that's not written down anywhere.
No.
So. Where do we have to think about the social contract? Because we know one to think about things like the stack. That we know.
Yeah, because that's in the game as we play it. Yeah.
So where do we think about... in your opinion, Walt, where's the number one spot where we would think about the social contract? And making sure that everyone's here to have a good game?
I think it has to start with the Rule Zero conversation, right? Or I should say, because we're referring to the Commander Rules Committee documentation, they would technically not call it the Rule Zero conversation. I mean, they might, but that's technically reserved, I believe, when you go on the website for discussing which cards, like, it's discussing the fact that you can break the Commander format in whichever way you would like. So you can change the rules, you can unban cards, like, it's the first, that's why it's like Rule Zero.
The first rule of Commander. It's like the first rule of D&D is like, these are just guidelines, play it however you want.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, but yes, often we refer to Rule Zero when we talk about the conversation we had before the game, where we go, okay, what kind of game we after, that kind of thing. We've talked about this before.
We've talked about it a lot, actually. We're both really, really big believers in Rule Zero. And from here on out, when we say Rule Zero, we are referring to the pre-game conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that goes to say for all of our episodes.
Yeah.
So we've talked about Rule Zero plenty of times, and we actually did have a discussion on what goes into a Rule Zero conversation way back when. Do you remember what episode
it was? Episode 2, I think.
Way back when.
Yes. The far enough back that we can barely remember it, but not so far back that James's voice echoes twice. Please don't listen to episode 1. If you can help it,
terrible.
Don't listen to episode 1. It's fun to listen to two guys having some fun for the first time, but the audio is so bad.
If you're listening to this for the first time and you see we've uploaded a bunch of stuff, just listen from here. Is my advice.
We just had to listen to episode 2, James. Oh my god.
But we're calling back to it. And I specifically wanted to call back to it because we kind of said that there are 3 key things in a Rule Zero discussion that should be mentioned. We advise to.
Yeah.
And those 3 things were how your deck wins, how consistently it does the winning thing, how consistently it gets to its win con, and how it prevents opponents from winning.
Yep. And we specifically outlined these in sort of opposition to the very conventional way of doing a Rule Zero conversation, which is using a power level. And when I say power level, I mean literally a number between 1 and 10, which we specifically and adamantly do not like very much. We don't. We don't think it's very descriptive. And most decks end up being a 7, right? That's like the meme that comes with this power level. Is like, I run Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation, but I don't have any tutors, so I guess it's a 7. And then someone's playing a precon, and they put one, extra piece of ramp in. And they're like, well, it was a precon, but I put some ramp in, so I guess it's a 7. It's always a 7. So
it's jank, but it's got synergy. It's a 7.
Yeah, literally everything's a 7. So yes, we prefer to really outline and I've spoken before about how I pull out the cards that I think people might have a problem with in my deck, I just straight up, I have that Shrines deck that has a little bit of stacks, and I just pull out, the stacks pieces, and just be like, this is what it will look like if I get it all together. And as I've said before, most people go, I don't really, or they kind of go, like that, and that's how, enough information for me to know I'm putting the deck away.
And that is actually a perfect example of Walt abiding by the social contract. That is, you realizing that just purely by having this Rule Zero conversation, you've seen people's reactions, and it's a reaction that doesn't adhere to what the Rules Committee said about everyone having a great game and enjoying themselves. You immediately have recognized the fact that that's like might not have fun here. Okay.
Yeah.
According to the social contract, I should put this deck away.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I hadn't thought of that. But that is, yeah, I think it definitely starts with Rule Zero. And like we've talked before about how our goal with these conversations, and the reason we don't mind them being slightly longer than saying, you know, it's a 7 or whatever, is because we want really fun games of Commander. Like our objective, I think we've said it before, but is for you to have better and more fun games of Commander.
You say it at the start of every episode.
I do.
You do say it at the start of that intro line has now become just ubiquitous in your brain.
Yeah,
that's just forgot what you're actually
it's like
saying.
An axiom, you know. It's like important to us, and I think we can all agree that the best games of Commander, regardless of whether it's precons or CDH and everything in between, is when it's close. We love close games, right? And so the best way to get that is to have a really honest and really like descriptive pre-game conversation.
Yeah, and exactly right. And I think the way we do it with Rule Zero and making sure that everyone's abiding by the same social contract is by making sure the power levels are aligned, which is, you know, except on that 1 to 10 scale. We always outline the cards we don't like playing against, possibly discussing banned cards being played. You mentioned before how Rule Zero...
That's the Rule Zero for sure, yeah.
How do you feel, just as I think we talked about maybe this in our question and answers episode, but let's have a bit of a sidetrack. How do you feel about banned cards in Commander if someone discusses it in Rule Zero?
To be honest, I think most people who are asking to like have a banned card unbanned effectively for that game, are not gonna ask for something unreasonable. Like I've never seen someone be like, "Hey, I really want to play the banned braids." I've never had someone say like, "Oh, I've got this banned braids list." I've never heard that before. But, you know, I've sometimes heard people be like, "Hey, I've got this Golos list." Yeah. And, it's Gates, you know, or something like really janky. And it's like, yeah, sure. Like, go off. That seems totally reasonable. So I'm always open to it. To be honest, it doesn't happen very often. I think I've probably only encountered this like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Once actually, funnily enough, in a CDH game where someone had proxied a list, and this was a few months back before.
Does it have like the Power 9 in it?
No, it was no, it was before Unfinity had been properly released, and they were playing Saw in half in their list.
That's the one that goes infinite with Dualcaster.
I think so. Yeah. It's like destroy target creature. Its controller makes 2 copies of it or something.
That are half the power, half the toughness.
Half power, half toughness. Just says combo written all over it.
Yeah.
And because technically that card hadn't been released, if you're really explicitly reading the rules, then it's kind of going, well, that card's not legal in Commander. And he was like, do you mind if I play it? And we're kind of like, yeah, whatever. We'll just pretend we're playing Commander in a month. You know, like it's not...
We're time traveling.
We travel through time, yeah.
Speaking of Unfinity, I'm really curious to have a little discussion on this and how... And we'll do our best to tie it into the social contract here. But Wizards have released Unfinity cards that are legal in Eternal formats.
Yeah, the weird thing where like some of the cards
have
in Unfinity, the acorn hollow little symbol. So like for those who don't know, because I actually had to, nobody explained this to me. They just like said it, so I had to look for it. But when you look at a card, in the very center of the bottom of a Magic card, not all cards, but some cards have
most
a little...
Most rares and mythics have like the hollow.
They have this little... I forget what it's called. It's like a hollow something. A hollow stamp, I think, maybe. It's like a little like silvery, very reflective surface that's kind of at the bottom of the card. And the way that you can tell with Unfinity whether a card is legal in Eternal formats, like outside of, you know, Unfinity style stuff, is whether or not it has the acorn stamp in that little hollow spot at the bottom. So I think if it doesn't have the acorn... then it's legal.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not. So, like, yeah. So, for instance, in Commander's internal format, so everything that gets printed is just basically automatically legal in Commander unless someone tells you otherwise. So, in this case, they were like, hey, the ones that are not legal in Commander automatically are the acorn ones.
Now, in terms of a Rule Zero discussion and making sure everyone has fun because of what we're trying to implement here as the social contract.
Sure.
Do you think Unfinity sets and what we used to call like silver bordered cards, and also those playtest cards, from the mystery boost, because I run one in a
I
deck.
did know you run one.
I have a Niv Mizzet Is It tribal deck.
Actually, I need to amend what I previously said about people asking if they can play banned cards, because you 100%
yeah.
played against that deck, so James got this janky...
It's stupid. It's so bad.
Is it tribal deck? It's got like every Niv Mizzet in it, including...
Except the 5
not
color
the 5
one.
color, but
Yeah.
it does have Sliv Mizzet Hivemind, which is like, is it 2 blue, red, red?
Correct,
It's like
yeah.
the typical Niv Mizzet casting cost. I'm going to try and guess this, so don't tell me.
Okay.
It's flying.
Yeah.
Is it a 5/5?
Yep.
Okay, it says slivers you control have, when this creature deals damage to a player, draw a card.
Oh.
Do I have it?
I think it's the other way around. It's whenever this creature
Oh no, the creature reads, when you draw a card, this deals 1 damage to any target.
And each sliver also has tap to draw a card.
Oh, so it gives the Niv Mizzet Draco Genius abilities, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's either Draco Genius. How do I not know this off the top of my head?
There's a lot of Niv Mizzets.
There's a lot of Niv Mizzet, and that's the stupid one. But like those, the test cards,
Yes.
they're implicitly not allowed to be played.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
Same with silver bordered cards. I'm just really like, I think that Wizards know that Commander is their strongest format. That's why we're getting.
They say it all the time. It's their most popular
Yeah.
format by far. Yeah.
And it's why we're getting Warhammer 40k Commander decks. That's
Yeah.
why we're going into Universes Beyond, because
Yeah.
Universes Beyond is not going to be in other formats. It's for like Commander
I
and
think except Lord of the Rings, I'm pretty sure that one's going to be an actual standard set.
Is it really?
I'm pretty
Wow.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
That's cool. But what I'm trying to say is they're printing these cards, and it's inherently making the social contract harder to implement at Commander tables. Do you not see what I'm trying to say? Like,
No,
the Rule Zero
yeah.
conversation is now getting more and more complex, because
Yeah.
I find, I have a range of decks, so that's why I have, I approach it really easily. And most of my decks abide by the normal Rule Zero conversation of like, this is a lower powered, mid powered, and my top tier CDH decks.
Yeah.
But I then also have these random decks, like my Niv Mizzet one with that band card in it.
Yeah.
And that's fine as like a one-off, but now it's just everywhere.
It's
Like,
more complex, I think, is what
Yeah.
you're saying, right? Like, the conversation's not as cut and dry. Like, when you read the Commander ban list, right, it says, like, every card that refers to anti is banned,
Yeah.
So it's just, like, easy. And it says, like, every silver-bordered card is banned. Easy. I can get my head around that. There's a list of the cards that are specifically banned that you're like, cool, if it's on that list, it's banned. But, yeah, we have this weird example now of a set,
half a set
where
is banned.
some of it's banned. So, like, the description on that ban list is going to say, all cards printed in Unfinity that have a hollow acorn stamp. That's not very intuitive for someone who's just picked up the game.
Exactly. And I'm not just thinking about new players, but even old and experienced players. Like, I'm thinking of players that I play with that have really long history in this format as Commander, and they have a certain expectation of what Commander is. And especially from a Vorthos perspective as well, like, we're now getting into that territory where Vorthos is being shattered by these Unfinity kind of situations, where Commander is shifting so hard because now Wizards is implementing stuff. I think one of the biggest things that's being impacted is this Rule Zero and the social contract.
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
I don't really want to be playing against Space Jace that segments the board into sectors.
Yeah, to be honest, I think I'm inclined to agree with you. I think my way of sort of sticking to my guns without sort of making people feel uncomfortable if they're playing cards, because that's obviously the last thing we want to do, especially when you're playing a game store, is to like say to someone, I hate that card.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to do that, especially someone who's new who might not know,
Yeah.
But I sort of said to myself, I'm not playing any of these cards. I just said, I think they're goofy, and I don't really believe that pretty much any of them they don't enhance the game for me. They don't make it more interesting or more fun. They make it more complicated and more weird. And also, an important thing, they kind of make it less accessible. Like, they're kind
It's
of...
a bigger barrier to entry for new players.
They're
for
sort
sure.
of jokes, right? So,
Yeah.
like, me and you have been playing Magic for, 2-3 years now. Not that long for a podcast. Don't hate us.
We really do research. We promise.
We play a lot, I swear. And so we get some of the jokes, right? When you see a card, you're kind of like, oh, right, it's referring to this mechanic, and it's kind of like doing it in a wacky way, like the kicker sticker thing.
Yeah, and the hat tribal stuff. That's a joke that's been in Magic for years.
Yeah.
Like, hat tribal or mustache tribal.
Yeah, so we get the jokes, and then we also have the knowledge to understand the mechanic, because we're kind of like, oh, it's a joke version of this mechanic, so it probably works like this. But if you're outside of that context of playing Magic for a long time, one, the jokes don't make any sense. Yeah. So when you look at the card, the second thing that happens is you look at it and you're like, I've never heard of a mechanic like this before. I don't even know what it's referring to. Like, imagine if you saw kicker sticker and you were like, what?
Or tickets. Have you seen tickets?
Oh, for the
like
attractions.
Energy.
And
See, now, like, there are some that are... It's just, again, it's making that discussion at the start of a Commander game more difficult.
Yeah.
And I want to make a sweeping statement here that I have actually looked at Unfinity, and I'm organizing with a couple of friends to do an Unfinity draft. And I am super excited for it because it is a wacky set and I do find it funny. Yeah. And in isolation, it's a funny product for the right people. But again, it's... Like, again, I really want to play Unfinity. I think it's a great set, but I don't think it has a place in Commander because Commander is such a delicate thing. Like, we're talking about a philosophy that it goes back as far as Socrates. That is... It's such a complicated format that it requires that level of philosophical thinking.
Yeah, we require a social contract so that we all have fun and are playing the same game.
Exactly, and I think sets like this, and I think things that Wizard are doing with, releasing these really complicated mechanics or wacky interactions make that harder to implement.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. And look, in the theme of Infinite, because we were talking about Unfinity. I suppose we would be remiss if we're going to be talking about Rule 0 to not refer to our beloved Rule Infinity.
True. If you're not familiar, Walt and I created a Rule Infinity discussion, which, like Rule 0 happens before the game, Rule Infinity happens after the game.
Yep. Yeah. So, the game encompasses the entire set of numbers between 0 and infinity. So infinity should be the way that it ends, right? Yeah. And it's also like our sort of, tagline is it's to take you to your infinite future Commander games, right? You're taking the fun that you had and you're applying it so you can work out how you go forwards from there.
I would love to reference a beloved animated Space Ranger, but I'm scared we might hit copyright.
It was episode 4, by the way, that we referred to Rule Infinity.
I think it's a really good episode to go back to and listen to, even though I said start listening from here. I think that's a good one when you're thinking about the social contract, because that Rule Infinity really discusses what you did like and what you didn't like about the game, and also talks about how your deck mechanically worked as well. Like, what cards do you think I should take out? All that kind of stuff. I think when we're talking about the social contract, it really does start with Rule 0 in terms of Commander, but it also starts with the Rule Infinity as well, because it's making sure your next game is just as fun or funner.
Ideally. Yeah.
More fun is the grammatically correct way of saying it.
I didn't want to say anything.
I saw the twitch in your eye and I was like, I should probably grammatically correct myself.
I'm so concerned. People have told me I've got a very expressive face before. I'm so concerned that I'm like telling people that I disapprove of something they say with like a weird facial expression. So now...
You know what? Well, we should play poker.
Oh, no.
God. I'd take all of your money.
You almost certainly would. Oh, my word. Well, look, we have lots left to cover, including getting into the nitty-gritty of, the do's and don'ts of the game inside the game and the do's and don'ts outside of the game. But before that, we've got a new segment here, James.
I'm excited.
We're going to hear a little something about a new thrifty card. That's going to ring a bell for some of you not so much. The thrift shop is the bell it's ringing. No.
For those that aren't initiated, Walt actually has a blog piece, like a content blog post that he does called Thrifty Thursdays, which every Thursday we get blessed by Walt's, you'll hear it in a second, but a zany explanation of why you should run a card in a deck, or just, I mean, it's gone beyond that now, to be honest. It's
sort of just like riffing on a card. It's sometimes it's like an ad for a card, and sometimes I'd lose my mind.
Yeah.
And just decide to use a card as an excuse to fall off the deep end, as you're probably hear in a moment.
I'm honestly really excited to hear it because it's something that we all really appreciate. And if you actually listen to the card, it's usually a really underrated card that is thrifty. You can pick this up at your local Savers or op shop. It's cheap.
Yeah, I typically feature cards that are like less than $2, often less than $1. But yes, we're bringing it to the podcast. You can expect one every single episode. And also, for those who don't know, we'll mention in a second, but I've made a couple of these into videos that you can view on TikTok. So
yes, we're TikTokers as well. That's something that we're happy to say on the internet for people to hear.
I've never used the word TikTokers, but now I guess I have to. Yes, G_Commander Community if you want to see some video versions of these. But James, do you want to give us a description of the card that we're going to do this week?
Fantastic. This week's thrifty card. Are we referring to it as the thrifty card? This is the first time we've done it.
A thrifty... It's
thrifty.
Thrifty.
It's thrifty. The thrifty interlude card of the week
nice.
Is Stand or Fall. For 3 and a red, you get an enchantment that reads, at the beginning of combat on your turn, for each defending player, separate all creatures that player controls into two piles, and that player chooses one. Only creatures in the chosen piles can block this turn.
Ladies, gentlemen, in between neither and both, it's the ultimate showdown! Good versus evil! Finally, after many proxy battles have been fought over these long millennia, the two face off to decide the fate of our universe! Nothing stands between them, and they stand completely and utterly equal in every respect except by name. Who will prevail? Wait a minute! Folks, I do not believe my eyes. Good has asked evil to split itself in half. Very politely, might I add. And evil has actually agreed to do it. It's like divide and conquer, except it's... No, wait, it is divide and conquer, but it's fun. Get budgeted. A little insight into my mind.
Okay, so as you can see, this interlude, we saw this grand battle in the theater of your minds, I hope. You saw an incredible commenter talking over a gladiator arena where good and evil are pitched against each other, and they both agreed to, just split it in half. Split it in two.
Split in half instead. Yeah.
I do want to talk about this card really quickly, though. How is this so cheap?
I don't know. It's very old. I think it's printed in Invasion, which is like OG. It's definitely like an old border card if you're familiar with when the old borders became the new borders.
But if you're in red, in Commander is a very aggressive color. That is just your color to be like, I'm going to run this enchantment. It's 4 mana. Comes out turn 4. If you play it early, it's great. If you play it at the end, could probably win you the game.
Yeah. Well, the place where I play it is Seguin. And the really cool thing that happens is Seguin has Menace. So if someone has 2 creatures and you divide them into 2 piles and they can only block with one of them, you just can't block Seguin.
That's mono red unblockable.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Literally, yeah. No.
In very specific circumstances.
Yeah, no, it's a cool card. And yeah, if you want to see me, I'll be turning some of these into TikTok. So go follow us on G_Commander Community on TikTok, and we'll see some video versions. Maybe James will feature on one someday.
I hope so. I really do. All right, should we get back into the etiquette of Commander?
The etiquette of Commander. Let's do it.
I think this is going to probably be the longest segment that we talk about, and it's the do's and don'ts in the game.
Sure. So this is specifically, we're in a game of Commander. Yeah. We're playing, there's 4 of us sat down, maybe 5, 3, whatever. So this is what we can do, what we can't do, or not can and can't. What perhaps we should and shouldn't do.
It's a much better way of wording it, because I think this is the thing that everyone thinks about when they're thinking about the etiquette of Commander. It's always in the game. So I'm glad we started by talking about before the game with Rule 0.
Sure.
And I want to say, stick around, folks, because we're going to talk about outside the game, because there is etiquette when you're not playing a game as well. But let's talk about inside the game. And I like to refer to it as when you're dining at a restaurant, you sat down, let's say you take your Commander pot out and you go to a pizza place, you sit down. Okay. There's some rules when you're sitting down at a dinner table together.
Yeah, you don't pick your nose.
Don't pick your nose. Don't touch my pizza after you pick your nose.
That's a double whammy.
Yeah, excusing yourself from the table, all that kind of stuff,
Yes.
right? There's just general, like, raising your hand in class and queuing up at savers, right?
Yeah.
There's general rules. So I'm going to kind of rapid fire some quick ones, and then we'll talk a little bit in discussion about some ones that I think are prevalent.
Yeah.
But quick one, touching other people's equipment.
Equipment as in...
Game pieces, like your cards,
okay.
your playmat.
I thought you meant equipment specifically, and I was like, what a weird line to draw. You can touch anyone's cards, but not Swiftfoot boots. You can't touch Swiftfoot boots. That is off limits. If you touch Swiftfoot boots, James will kick you in the head.
My Ember Cleave is very precious to me.
Understandable. That's expensive.
Yeah, it won me a lot of standard games
Yeah.
back in the day. But I think, like, touching other people's game pieces is generally a bit of a no-no.
I think without asking, yeah. Unless you ask someone like, oh,
Yeah.
hey, can I pick this up or something, generally don't touch them. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
And that's a very quick way of making it okay. Like, usually, as long as you don't have sticky fingers, like in
the
like
skin at the beginning, yeah.
As long as you don't have sticky fingers, I'm okay with you having a read of my card. That's totally fine, especially if you're trying to understand what the card does.
Yeah.
But if you're just picking stuff and moving game pieces around, or also just, like, touching, like, I have very special playmats. Like, I've got the Euroco East Asia playmat promotion.
Like the set. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, the one that was done a while ago for Euroco. It's very good looking.
I think it's like literally just the art of the new Euroco printing. Yeah,
it's so nice. But
It's
it is
really
now
cool.
fetching a really high price as
Yeah.
well because it's so limited. So
Sure.
generally, I don't like people touching it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just like I want to make sure it's all kept well. But like,
Yeah.
if you ask to touch my cards, I'll probably give you the card and hand it over pretty confidently.
Well, I think an important thing to note here, though, you just said like that playmat is expensive. Some of the cards we play with are very expensive. Not me, but in general, like I've seen OG dual lands. I've seen Tundra, I've seen Tiger in person. And I would personally, like, as a general rule, I don't touch people's cards. I will never touch a dual land, like, as a principle. It just, like, freaks me out. I'm like, what if I slip and bleed on it or something, Like, I just don't want to have it on my conscience that I broke someone's $650 Tundra or something.
Your nightmares are weird. But, like, no, I totally agree. Like, touching, for example, a Gaia's Cradle, that's like a reserve list card that sits at about $1,000, right?
Yeah.
Some people spend $1,000 on a motorbike. Right? You wouldn't just jump on someone's motorbike and start riding it.
No, it's true. You wouldn't.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, you
yeah.
have to be considerate, because this is some stuff that people have put value and also emotion into as well. Like, we have emotional connections to cards.
Yeah, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm interested. I think it's probably going to be the same as what is in my mind. But if someone was playing a Consecrated Sphinx, right? It's like a $50 card, roughly.
Sweet
And
card.
you cast Gilded Drake, and you exchanged control of Gilded Drake with Consecrated Sphinx. Would you... Oh, this is a funny example, because Gilded Drake's probably worth more. In fact, it is worth more.
A little bit.
Yes, but if someone said, oh, actually, I'd rather if you didn't touch my Consecrated Sphinx, what would you do?
I would probably be like, that's fine. And because I've got whiteboard tokens, which help a lot. I would represent it with a whiteboard token. I wouldn't cause a fuss over that, especially if it's and again, we play at a store where there's a big range of players, big age difference.
Yeah,
some like of the 16-year-old guys that come in and play, they will look at a card and be like, I spent my entire pocket money allowance on this card. Don't touch it.
Yeah,
like that's my entire this is my 401k right here. Like I think you should respect that decision.
Yeah. I'm completely with you. I would just use a token, use anything else, and just be
just
like, this is a con sphinx, and we do that all the time with tokens anyway. So
Exactly.
it's not really any different.
100% agree. Speaking of equipment, though, there is something that I did want to discuss about the like what's on the equipment. Like playmats are a really commonplace thing for this, but explicit content on playmats, card sleeves.
I think, and look, again, we come from a game store 90% of the time.
Yeah.
I think just don't bring them.
I totally
if you're not
agree.
sure, like if you look at something and you're like, I'm not sure if some people might find this uncomfortable, I would just not bring it. If it's explicit. If it's just like, well, because, some people are going to take issue with the fact that, like, one person we play with has a playmat with two women who are embracing on it. And, some real I'm not
horrible people.
Yeah, horrible
we'll say.
people. We'll use that word. Would be like, I'm not comfortable with this, and those people can leave the store instead. That would be my suggestion.
But that's a social contract in and of itself.
That
right?
is,
we
yeah.
encourage acceptance and things like
Yes.
that. But there is a certain level of like, you know, explicit content. If you're at the kitchen table and you're around people that you know and you know what their values are and you know what they're comfortable with, by all means, you can have a play mat of topless people.
If you like.
I don't mind. That's in the comfort of your own home.
Totally.
I'm really fine with that.
In a store, I think, as a general rule, just leave it at home. Bring a plain one instead.
You wouldn't go to a primary school with a t-shirt with that content on it, would
No,
you? Yeah.
and we do play, you know, what's the official age range for Magic the Gathering? I think it's 12 plus or something,
Is it really?
right?
Well, there you go.
I think-
That's a good guideline, right? Expect people of 12 years old to be viewing what you're using.
Yeah, so if you wouldn't feel comfortable showing it to a 12... Well, I'm not even... No.
Yeah, I think we don't even have to finish that sentence.
No.
And we'll move on
We
pretty
all know,
promptly.
we all know.
Another quick one is getting up and back from the table. I think this is something that's a little bit of a social contract discussion. Like, I'm fine if you need to run to the toilet. I'm not going to force you to sit and do the I need to pee dance. But, like, if you need to go, just quickly excuse yourself and come straight back.
Most Commander games, once you're in, like, the really nitty-gritty part of it, it's probably going to be at least, like, 5-10 minutes before your turn happens again anyway. Yeah. I will say, this is within the context of leaving to go to the bathroom. If you're like, well, I had my turn... I'll just, like, duck out for 10 minutes and smoke at the front and talk to my friend. That's just rude, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think if it's for a need, like going to the bathroom or any other need that you have.
Food, drink, whatever.
Whatever you might need.
Sleep.
You can... Quick powwow. Sorry, guys. Had a long week. Just going to take a quick power nap under the table.
Wake me up when it's my turn.
Wake me up when it's my turn. Don't sleep with Commander players. What I'm saying is...
Don't sleep with Commander players.
Do sleep with Commander players.
No, don't.
Don't sleep under the table at a game store is what we're trying to say.
That's good. That's exactly what I was referring to as well. Yeah,
definitely what we're saying. But I think, look, if you're just socializing and you get up from the table and have a chat with, you know, people at the counter or have a chat with, you know, even if you get trapped, like, you know, you can be making your way back from the bathroom and someone tries to talk to you. Try and end that conversation quickly to be polite to the players that you are in a game with. Yeah. Because they might be waiting for you.
I'm interested, actually, James. I imagine we're probably going to talk about it anyway, but because this is talking about someone like leaving the game to engage in conversation. How do you feel about people who are in the game but like not focusing on the game because they're talking to someone else for like a long, extended conversation?
Yeah,
what do you think?
Look, the next dot point that I had here was paying attention to people and, you know, even engaging in outside conversations like trades, for example, is a super common one at a game store. At home, you can talk trades relatively easy at the kitchen table while you're playing a game.
Because it's probably the people you're playing with, right? Yeah. So you're all still in the game. You're not like leaving the game, even mentally, to talk to someone about a trade, which is what's going to happen at a game store, right?
Exactly. But in a game store, you have so many distractions around you.
So much noise,
all that kind of stuff. But I think personally, now, if you can sit in a restaurant that's busy and have conversation with the people you're sat at a table with, you should be able to focus on that player's turn as well when they're playing the Commander.
So I see you're going full into this like
restaurant
etiquette thing. Yeah, okay, I see it.
Yeah,
no, it's true. I think if you're at dinner and you're on your phone, it's kind of rude, you know. And likewise, if you're at dinner and you called someone and were like, "Hey, I've got a Gaia's Cradle here. It's I just nicked it from someone."
Or you just lean over your chair and start talking to the people on the other. Hey, that fish looks good. What's that?
That's Mystic Remora, James.
Is it up for trade? I've got some bolognese here if you want to trade. Wow, this metaphor has gone strong, hasn't it?
Can you tell it's been a while since me and James did one of these?
Yeah, we're getting back into the swing of it. But I'm saying that I think that a really big do is pay attention to people on their turn. This is a really polite thing to do in any situation. If you're at a meeting at work and your boss is saying something, do you think you should talk to your colleague next to you or pay attention to your boss?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to pay attention to your boss. I actually saw something really interesting that is in line with this the other day, which was, I think it was a Twitter thread and someone was like, what's the what's a really important thing you've had to learn about Commander that took a really long time for you to learn? And it was the answer that someone provided was how to spectate. Because, and they said, look, you know, in a typical Commander game, 75% of the time, it's not your turn. And it's like actually a skill to be actively engaged in someone's turn and saying stuff like, wow, that's amazing. Like if you see a cool synergy and being like, oh, like how does this work? And like actually being like, not just like paying attention, like which is quite passive.
But being actively engaged
in it, right? Because it's a social game we play. There's a social contract, as we said.
Exactly.
So yeah, like, you know, try and learn to be actively in the game if you can.
And also, you're going to see some really cool stuff when you pay attention to other people's games.
Yeah, you might find cards that you might want to put in one of your decks.
Like if I'm playing across the table from Walt and Walt puts down a card, I usually take a second to read that card because I'm like, this is probably a really cheap card that maybe I can get for one of my decks.
Yeah.
You know, that's
it'll make you a better player, right? To be
100%.
Noticing these kinds of things.
Notice other people's play patterns. Notice other people. I 100% agree with you.
Well, I feel like the main thing that we're getting from this general section is just to like be in the game.
Be involved.
Don't touch other people's stuff as well, but the main like takeaway here is just like stay in the game, stay focused, stay engaged, and you know, you can go if you need to, but only if you need to.
All right, a contentious one at any Commander table, especially when there's expensive cards floating around, eating and drinking. How do we feel about it? Because I have a couple of mixed opinions.
I think drinking is fine if you're like being very careful with it.
Like a bottle of water is totally cool.
Yeah, but even like you can have like a Coke or, you know, like, you know, whatever else you're drinking. That's totally cool. Hot tea, you know, whatever. But you should be careful with it, right? You're dealing with people's belongings. You don't want to damage anything, obviously. Eating is interesting. I personally will pretty much always like leave a game to eat. Yeah. It's just like kind of where my brain is at. I can't really do the two things at once thing. I'm also like very particular about touching my cards when I've been touching food because I'm like, I don't want to get the food on the cards. Yeah. And this is the thing I think to consider is like, even if you're not worried about your cards, like I know we said don't touch other people's cards at all, but like mostly people are going to do that anyway, right? People are going to, you could be like, oh, can I read this? You pick it up, you know, you're still touching it.
Yeah.
Even if you are fine with touching your cards when you're eating food, you don't really know how other people feel about you touching their cards when you've been eating food.
And also just food around your cards in general.
Yeah, I personally don't like it a lot. It depends on the food, I will say, because like, you know, there are foods you can eat that are kind of quite clean. Like they don't really get on you. Like you can eat them with chopsticks or something and be sort of like leaned away from the table. Like I'm usually fine with that. But whenever there's sort of like
saucy stuff
and like touching it with your hands, if you have to like actively touch the food to eat it, I'm like worried about you touching your cards, let alone my cards. Yeah.
See, like I'm making a realization that I eat quite a bit when I'm at the game store.
You too. And I'll agree with that.
It's because like the snack food there is amazing. Like
you're also supporting the store when you buy it, right?
Yeah, and there's the other thing, like Commander as well. When you go in for a Commander game, you're not usually you're not paying for entry.
Yeah.
So having a bit of a snack and a drink at the store is not too bad. Like you know, there's this built-on jerky that I love at our local game store, which is awesome, and there's always a healthy supply of Pringles cans.
Yes, a lot of those.
Yeah, but like I do it quite a lot. Now I make a really big effort, or I have done in the past couple of weeks, to ask if people mind. That's something that I've done, and something that I'm going to encourage the listeners to do is say if you don't. Say if you don't mind, or say if you do mind, be very quick with it, because people will just sit down and eat, like I will.
Yeah.
Like if you're playing with me, most likely going to have a Snickers in my pocket.
For sure. I would also add a side thing here, just because I am the kind of person who brings a lot of decks when I go to a store, and I am like 90% of the time happy to lend my decks out to people. I know a lot of people are not so fine with that, but I don't know, I'm just like generally a pretty trusting person. I don't really give a shit if someone nicks a card or something. Personally.
Well, most of your cards are like 50 cents, so it's not a hard loss to recoup.
It's the appeal of the cheap cards. But I would say definitely if you're lending someone else's deck, be extra careful that you are like your hands are super clean, you're not like rubbing them on your face and your hair and stuff,
and also like shuffling as well. Shuffling is a really weird thing, because I actually borrowed one of your decks not that long ago, and it had these really gorgeous art sleeves. I think it was your Marchesa deck,
No, I think it's my Reese deck. My Reese
Reese-
deck has the, like, it's like a guy in, like, armor. It's a dragon shield, like, brushed sleeve.
Yeah, and I knew that they were really nice sleeves, so I was very delicate when I shuffled. Very delicate.
Thank you. Appreciate
Because
that.
I abide by the social contract
Hey,
of Commander.
we're doing it.
We're learning things.
The Space Commanders. We're doing it,
Hope you're
Commanders.
listening.
Yeah, you better be.
All right, well, there are a couple of quick fire ones. We've
Cool.
talked about that, but I want to talk about one that is a little bit more nuanced.
Mm-hmm.
Advice. Specifically giving advice to someone when you're in a game.
Yeah, this one's tricky. I've thought about this quite a lot, where I think, to be honest, I don't want to call anybody out, but I think a decent number of people do advice wrong, which is that they offer it when it's happening. Like, whatever the advice applies to, they're giving it when it's happening. The really tricky thing with Commander is most people, well, everyone's in the game, right? Even if you've lost and you're no longer playing, you were still a member of that game.
And if you're still sat at the table, which if you've listened to our Rule Infinity conversation, we actually encourage you to stick it out and watch how the game plays out. Because then you're, like you said, actively engaging in the game.
Yes, exactly
you're
right.
invested in it.
Yeah. You know, all of those people have some sort of vested interest in the game. Even if you died, like you're out of the game, if you have a way of preventing the person who killed you from winning, you might do it. You know, like some people are like that.
I'm pretty spiteful, I'm not gonna
Yeah,
lie.
like I think it's a thing that you can do. It's also probably part of the social contract. You want to, make sure people aren't freely killing you. So you might be kind of like, well, if you kill me, I'm going to do this, Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm getting off track. But I think when you're offering advice when something is happening that you're offering advice about. So, someone goes to combat and you're like, hey, if you attack that planeswalker, this will happen. It's just, I don't know. I feel a bit iffy about it. I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I feel like you're unfairly influencing them. I will draw a line here between this and politics.
Yeah, that's what I was going to touch on, because, like, me saying, I advise you to swing at the planeswalker because it's about to ultimate, and that's a detriment to all of us. That's politics. That's actually not game advice.
Actually, I'm gonna retract that one. That's a good example of a good place you can offer input. I'm thinking more along the lines of, oh, hey, if before you go to combat you did this, you get more power there. I just feel a bit iffy about that. Whereas, if it's after the game, Rule Infinity, it keeps coming back to us, and you're like, hey, by the way, when you went to combat here, you could have done something like this,
have you
for
thought
next
about
time.
that?
Yeah, maybe next time that could be something you could think about. Then it's like it's just like coaching, right? You're just like giving some input on how they play the game.
Yeah.
And I feel comfortable with that, but not so much with the like, oh, do this and that'll make this really amazing. I don't know. I feel a bit weird about that.
Yeah,
personally.
I 100% agree with you that offering advice, specifically advice that's like, especially like just in general in politics, I think it's really helpful to do that. Like reminding someone of a trigger is really helpful advice.
That's fine.
That's advice that you can offer. Like if they miss their upkeep trigger, remind them. Like say, hey, you had an upkeep trigger here.
Well, and most of the time I found out recently, the competitive ruling from a judge, if you can't skip the trigger, it just gets put on the stack.
When you remember it.
Yeah.
I found that out recently too.
Yeah.
So like if you have an cumulative upkeep trigger or something, and someone already cast a non-creature spell, and then you go, so for example, Mystic Remora, for example, right?
Yeah.
You forget the cumulative upkeep trigger, and then on your turn, someone casts a non-creature spell, and you go, Mystic Remora trigger, do you pay? And then someone goes, actually, we didn't do your cumulative upkeep trigger on that. That then gets put on the stack before the Mystic Remora trigger itself of like casting and paying.
Yeah, so that's like actually how it would be resolved. So in a commander game, if someone's missed a trigger, as a general rule, it's fine to just be like, If it's a May, I will say you should ask the table, like, how do we feel about like this being,
in the perfect world, I generally now start saying, especially at higher powered tables, not specifically CDH, but like higher powered tables where people are busting out good decks. I actually ask at the start in Rule 0, how do we feel about missed triggers, folks?
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's one of my kind of pet peeves now as well, because I specifically Liesa, my Death and Taxes deck, it has upped its power game a little bit, so it sits at higher power levels. And I'm usually the player that plays on the stack. I don't play in the upkeep triggers zone that much. And I don't play in the term of like, you're going to pay the extra for this. Are you going to do this? You lose 2 life here. Like, that's not my regular play style. So I'm really bad at remembering my triggers with Liesa. So I generally ask the table, hey, if I forget something, are we good to,
cool.
So if you draw 3 cards and I've got a Smothering Tithe out, if it goes round the turn, how do we feel about it?
Yeah.
Like, should I make the treasures or should I not?
That
So,
totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing about missed triggers is that often it just like costs nothing to the game. Like most
Usually,
of the
yeah.
time it has almost no impact, so like it's fine. And also, yeah, just remind someone. If you know someone's missed it, just be like, oh hey, by the way, that trigger's now. Don't be over their shoulder, like, you know, running like crazy.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you can tell they've missed it, just gently prod them. That's fine.
And I also think, like, you know, with new players as well, I think because, I mean, we're all about having better games of Commander on this podcast and just in general. How do we feel about coaching and assisting new players, especially when it comes to advice and while we're in the game with you? What's the polite thing to do with a new player?
I think as soon as you can, you need to get them making their own decisions. And then afterwards, you can explain the way that those decisions affected the game, right? So, like, you give them all the tools you can give them that let them, like, actually play the game. Like, they need to know the rules, right? So you need to be like, okay, you untap, you upkeep, you draw.
Trample means this.
Yeah, you can, and you can, like, you know, lay all that out for them, and you have to, right? Otherwise, they're never going to learn the game.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the actual, like, oh, who are you attacking kind of thing, it really depends. Like, if the specific goal of the game, like, if you're playing, like, basically a tutorial match with someone, by all means, just be like, hey, let's do this, and then we'll do this, and then we'll do this, and this is how that all goes. But yeah, if someone's like newish, but they know the rules, they know what they're doing.
They've bought a pre-con now.
They've played 5 to 6 games kind of thing. They know what they're doing. Let them make their own decisions. And then afterwards, you can kind of be like, oh, by the way, you know, when you board wiped here, you actually had like 10 creatures. So even though you were scared of that player, you kind of blew up your own board. So I probably wouldn't have board wiped there. I might have waited like another turn cycle, let them play more creatures, then blow it up. You know,
Get more
that's
value.
that's the kind of advice you can give. But yeah, I think again, I like it better when it's after the game.
I think it's like the equivalent of backseat driving, right?
Yeah.
People say backseat driving because it's now like a bad connotation, like, oh, stop backseat driving, which like you're annoying when you do that. That's breaking the social contract. That's doing something that makes other people uncomfortable, so you've broken it there.
Yeah.
So, you know, explain after the game. Explain when it is an appropriate time.
For sure.
All right, we're still in the game.
Mm-hmm.
We're not quite finished yet, but there's a really contentious topic that I'm really curious to get your input on.
Sure.
Getting tilted.
So for those non-gamers out there, we mean getting frustrated.
Yes.
Getting annoyed with how the game is unfolding. I imagine it's often, you know, my spell gets counterspelled.
Or you board wipe for the 9th time.
Yeah.
My commander now costs 15.
Yeah, there's things that generally start to tick you off about how the game is going.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because, like, getting tilted is an emotional response that, you know, everyone has the right to express their emotions. But there's a social etiquette that you need to have around getting frustrated at a game. And I think it all comes off in how you communicate that frustration to the table. A really easy example is when someone plays a card that, you know, is a little bit... It got high salt scores on EDH Rec. If you've not seen that list on EDH Rec, go look it up. You'll quickly learn why people can get tilted in Magic the Gathering, because these cards exist.
Yes, and we collectively agree we don't like them.
Yeah, for example, like Winter Orb or Expropriate.
Or Vorinclex.
Vorinclex, yeah. All these cards, if you don't know them, look them up. You'll see why we can get angry at them. But if someone casts a card that maybe wasn't spoken about in Rule 0 and it hits the table and it's like completely game ending to your deck. Like, okay, for example, you're playing Arami, someone plays a Rest in Peace. Oh, there you go. There's the frustration. There's a pulsing vein on Walt's forehead right now.
I think there's only one reasonable thing to do in this situation, and that's murder.
The card murder or actual homicide?
The card murder. Yes. No, definitely the card murder.
For any police that might be listening to this podcast.
No. Look, I actually think, okay, I want to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, go on.
I think one of the healthiest ways you can express your emotions is to just tell people how you feel. So
it's just shockingly simple, but I really agree with you.
Well, and like some people might find it uncomfortable, the idea, but like, you know, let's say, I'm playing around and you cast Rest in Peace. I just say, wow, that completely shuts off my deck. That's really frustrating. That versus me going,
yeah.
What a world of difference. Even though I'm still the same, the emotion's the same. One of them is like, like this is the feeling I have inside, and you don't know what I'm gonna do about it. Versus just me articulating it is me like showing you, hey, my response to that emotion is to tell you how I'm feeling about it. That like safety is important, and some people, if you're a woman and you're playing in a game store, the behavior of men around you is genuinely threatening, and it's totally reasonable for that to feel threatening.
Especially frustration and anger.
Yes.
That's
and so,
a big thing.
If someone's doing the, you don't know what they could do.
Or like, I've actually been in games where I've seen someone hit the table, quite like, proper bang the table. And it's made me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
A 6'2" man.
Yeah.
Gone, whoa, that was really uncalled for. Like, I think that, it is a skill. I am going to recognize that not everyone, because this is something that you can actually teach someone to do, is articulate their emotions.
For sure.
And honestly, it's a skill that you really learn in therapy.
It takes time.
It does take time
and work. Yeah.
And it's a skill, but like generally the way I've learnt to communicate it is you go, okay, firstly is recognition. Yeah. I'm upset. I'm angry. I'm getting tilted at this game. Why? The first question is why that you ask yourself. If you don't ask why, you run down that rabbit hole of anger and frustration. And then, to be honest, everything is frustrating to you. Everything is, red flag to a bull kind of thing.
Yeah.
So ask yourself why. And when you're in your own head responding to that question of why, that's what you say. That's what you articulate to the table.
Yeah.
And it can be literally, that really frustrates me because rest in peace hoses my entire deck. I'm a graveyard deck. I can't get
I don't have
it.
any responses to this.
I can't get rid of it. I'm in black. I've already used my Feed the Swarm.
An important thing that happens when you do that in a game of Commander, it's a four-player game. You give someone the opportunity to say, well, hey, what's it worth to you if I get rid of it?
My life. I will give you my life if you get rid of rest in peace.
No, James, emotional regulation. Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
And that, again, this is, I think we should do a whole politics episode because we could dive down
we
into
talk about politics
a lot.
every episode, to be fair.
But yeah, you can really use this as a politics moment. If you're frustrated at something, remember, you're not the only resource you have.
Yeah, I think the important thing that happens when you choose not to express your emotion is you're closing yourself off from the possibility of anyone helping you with it. Because, the other thing that happens, if you're like, wow, I really am not enjoying this game anymore because of what's happened here, like that would be a very honest thing to say. Someone might be like, hey, feel free to concede if you'd like to. Like, if you need to take a step away.
Yep.
Or like, hey, do you want to have a chat outside? Like, you're giving people the opportunity.
We can pause the game if everyone at the table's okay.
Yeah, like you're letting people have the ability to help you,
Because let's be real, because it is a social format, and because it's so complex that we have to have this social contract, the reason why it's that complex is because our emotions are complex. And we have an emotional response to this game. That's why this social contract's here.
Yeah. Well, look, I think this is probably a good opportunity. We've talked a lot about the way that we feel in the game and the way that, the way to be a good player in the game. There's also a lot of Commander that happens outside the game.
Well, there's a lot of things that happen around Commander.
Yes, that's true.
And you can be one of those things that are around Commander. So there's a pretty decent, thing to consider when you're outside of the game or watching a game, spectating a game that you're not involved in. And it's actually a pretty tough topic to start with. But I do want to talk about one that might be a little bit stereotypical. Mm-hmm. Hygiene.
Yeah, if you play in a game store in particular, I think I'm just assuming here, but I think kitchen table, maybe it's because you get more control over who is going to be playing at that table. I think it's less likely that hygiene's going to be an issue. That's just like an assumption I'm making.
And also you're at home and people probably have driven from their home to you. Whereas, game stores, people might ride their bike in as well. They could ride their bike in, or I skateboard in, catch the train, whatever. You might be a little bit BO-y or a bit pongy. Now, we're really lucky because our local game store, I'm not sure if I've actually had to use it many times.
The deodorant?
Behind the counter. If you ask, it might be different. I'm really curious around the world if your local game store carries deodorant, because it is a stereotype that sweaty, nerdy gamers, that we get stinky.
Yeah.
All that. To be honest, I skateboarded here today. I'm probably a little bit pongy.
Yeah. I mean, also, like, even if you're not necessarily exercising, I am, like, a bit of an anxious person. I just kind of sweat most of the day.
Yeah.
I actually have to use, like, a very strong antiperspirant because otherwise I'll just sweat through the deodorant.
Walt crushes an entire pack of Old Spice and just beds it into the pores of his
Funnily
skin.
enough, maybe it's TMI, but I actually used to use Old Spice, and it's interesting because, like, different deodorants interact with, like, your natural smell in different ways. I should not use Old Spice.
Was it like a concoction of death or something?
Yeah, it's just,
Really?
it just like smells like my sweat, and so they just mix together, and then I just stink. I'm just like a
Okay.
stinky man.
Oh no, okay. Yeah, now I know never to buy you Old Spice for
Never buy me
Christmas.
Old Spice.
But yeah, I think hygiene is like one
It's important. It's
topic
important.
that I wanted to get out of the way quickly, to be honest, because it's a bit of a touchy one. But there's a couple of things that you can do pretty easily. One, usually you bring a bag to Magic the Gathering, chuck some deodorant in
Chuck
there,
some deodorant in there.
pack of gum.
Yep.
If you're going to the pizza shop across the road and you get that garlic onion pizza, have some gum afterwards. That's pretty nice. We're in close proximity when we play Commander.
Yep.
Or ask the game store people if they have a stick of deodorant or a can.
Yep.
The other thing that you can do, generally just let people know if they do, but in the politest way possible. Now, this is social etiquette outside of Magic the Gathering. If someone at work is a little bit stinky, it's like polite of you to let them know, because then you're saying, hey, you can fix this problem. You can go do that.
Yeah, for sure.
But don't be like, hey, Walt, you smell like a trash fire. That's a bad way of doing it. You can be like, hey, Walt, I've got some deodorant in my bag. Do you want to put some on?
Yeah. I will say, as someone who, because of my mental health sometimes doesn't get to shower as often as I would like to. Like, I know it might be a bit too real, but, like, it's a thing that some people go through where they're just,
100%.
like, because of their self-care or the way they feel about themselves, they're just, like, they just can't get in the shower. What I will do before I go to out anywhere, basically, when I'm going to be interacting with people, is I just, like, change all the clothes that I'm wearing.
Yeah.
And chuck a little bit of deodorant on. Like, even though I haven't showered, I'm not really that clean. It's probably not a good idea for me to be like that for an extended period of time. At the very least, I'm kind of being like, okay, I'm not going to stink. Like, I'm tolerable in the vicinity of other people.
Yeah, I think, again, because, like, what is the social contract in Commander? It's to make sure we're all having fun games of Commander.
And we're all comfortable.
And we're all
well.
comfortable, yeah. And if you're not playing a game of Commander, but you're standing next to a table watching people play Commander, you might throw someone off.
Yeah.
If you don't.
So this is how spectating ties in.
Yeah,
It's like well, I mean, it's true. Like, when we play in a
Yeah.
game store, yes, we're concerned with the people who we're playing with. But yeah, the people around us have an effect on... I vividly remember a night where someone farted. And it was... It
Sorry,
was bad. No, but I vividly remember that Troy plays with us, who is a dad, and he's like, I don't know how old Troy is, but he's like a lot older than me and you.
Not that much older.
No, he's sprightly.
27.
He just stood up and he just said, guys, that stinks.
Yeah.
Come on.
I do remember that
He
as well.
He
I
went
was in the
full
store.
dad on us. He was
Yeah.
just like, guys, come on.
And that's honestly, that's actually like a verbal, very tangible implementation of what we're talking about, the social contract. He's verbalizing the social contract to try not to fart in the middle of a game store.
I think the important thing he's doing there as well is he's not, like, targeting someone specifically when he does something like that.
He's not accusing.
No, he's just kind of being like, come on, guys, we can do better than this. Yeah. Like we are right now.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I farted earlier, we edited it out of the podcast. That's called courtesy, people. But let's talk about spectating.
Yes.
Because that's probably the biggest thing when you're not in a Commander game, but the social contract of Commander is important to think about.
Yeah. Well,
So-
if you're, like, talking to someone who's in a game or you're, like, around a table, I think you kind of are in the game. You're not a player in the game.
No, but you're involved in it.
But you're a factor,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I think I know where you're going with this, and I'm just going to say right off the bat, if you are a member of a game who is not a player, because that's what I would call a spectator, you should have almost no impact on the game whatsoever.
Correct.
By that I mean, you can talk to people, don't really talk to them about the game, again, unless you're talking about something that happened before.
Yeah, like, oh, that was the most perfectly timed board wipe.
Yeah,
well done, that was great.
That's cool, but like...
That's
yeah.
actually encouraged. If you're a spectator and someone does something cool, this is a do outside of the game. If someone does something really clever, congratulate them.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
some good, solid feedback. Like, I've now that CDH is getting really big at our store, I've noticed that I just watch sometimes. I'll kind of watch. And usually I'm really quiet and people will forget I'm behind them. And then there'll be like a counterspell war or some really clever interaction. I'll just go, oh, awesome. And people will be like, how long have you been there?
You're just looming
yeah,
behind
just this like lurking in the chat kind of thing.
I think that is the do, isn't it? It's like the
100%.
The don't is like the offering advice and the kind of participating in the game through the form of like influencing people. And the do is like be part of the game, but be the like encouraging, like, you know, engaged. Funnily enough, it's not dissimilar to what we said about offering advice. You know, don't...
It's the backseat gaming thing, right? It's the same philosophy. Don't backseat game someone. I mean... There is situations where that could be an okay thing. Like, for example, there's this really... Miles is his name. Incredible young guy that comes into the store. I think he's probably around 13, 14.
Yeah, maybe even younger.
And his dad comes in with him
Yeah.
Because a 13-year-old kid can't get to the game store on his own.
No.
So he sits there and his dad will sit behind him sometimes and occasionally offer advice. That's okay. That's a new player learning some stuff. And sometimes I've said... You know, that I do a lot with new players. I try to sit down with them and play a game with them. But sometimes I'll say, are you in a game? Do you want me to be like your wingman, your co-pilot?
Yeah.
And like I can say, and just quickly say to the table, hey guys, I'm just going to help Walt out. He's brand new. He's only played a couple of games of Magic. I'm going to co-pilot here.
For sure.
That way it also makes, because especially if you're the only new player and there's 3 other really experienced players, makes the game more fun for everyone. Because you can be like, oh, you're going to get hosed here. If you do this, you might be back in the game. They might have not thought of that, but because you're there to help them, that's a way of getting around it. But I think again, it's like the backseat gaming philosophy. Don't backseat game, but there are some exceptions to the rule, but it's definitely stricter. When you are not actively playing the game, do not say, oh, do this.
Yeah.
Counter that. They've got this in their hand.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
No.
Do not reveal game information.
Definitely not. I think the recurring theme here is that, like, most of the things that we've said you shouldn't do can be fine if you're communicating effectively with the people you're playing with and the people around you first. Not all of them. You know, the hygiene thing is kind of like just a do or don't sort of thing. But yeah, like most of the way that we're encouraging you to play the game, you know, you can have someone look over your shoulder if you really want to. You can eat at your table if you really want to. Like, these things are okay if everyone is on board with it.
It's the social... The whole point of it is to make sure everyone's happy doing it.
Yeah, social contract.
And I think it's interesting, but like just communicating to someone that's in a game, especially on their turn, is usually really disrupting to the game and can affect the other player's fun.
It's also really disrupting when you're the player. Like, sometimes you're aware of information and someone's like, oh, don't forget you can do this. And it's like, okay, I know that. I'm trying to like get it all straight in my head before I decide what to do.
I'm trying to cast the perfectly timed game-ending spell here. I know about my upkeep.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that the other thing that I should also mention here is if you're outside the game... Again, we've talked about touching other people's play mats and equipment and cards.
Yep.
Don't do it. I think one of the things that people outside games love to do is look at the top card of someone's library.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, I'm outside the game. I'm not important here. I can know. But by doing that, even just respond... I mean, you're an incredibly expressive person. If you did that, I could probably tell what card it was. It would probably light up in your eyes. It's like, it's a Torment of Hailfire. But like...
Open book.
Yeah. Even just by reacting to the card on top. If you look at the card and go, ooh... People know it's a good card.
Yeah, it's info. Well, like, you know, if someone had the possibility of milling that player...
They might
be like, hey, I'll mill you right now. Like, it's extra information that shouldn't be in the game.
And I think that if people start doing that at my tables that I'm playing at, I'm gonna try and encourage them not to do it because it's game information that can be revealed.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Well, look, I think the other thing that we often get when we're outside of the game, and look, sometimes in that same circumstance where someone's like sort of lingering nearby, is you start getting someone trying to organize a game.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like someone's like, oh, hey, honestly, me and James, maybe it's because
We
we
do
have
it a
the
lot.
podcast. Well, but also like we get asked a lot, like, oh, hey, I really want to get a game in with you. It's lovely, by the way, when people do this. And people say like, I really want to play a game with you. I always find it very flattering.
I actually got a specific request the other week at the store that they specifically wanted to play against my Brutaclad deck. Because we've spoken about it a bunch of times, and they're like, I want to see what's so special about this deck. Can I play against it? I'm like, yeah, 100%. And
yeah, that's great.
To reassure people, Walt and I really do like playing games with lots of people. We're not the type of people, like Walt and I actually very rarely play together anymore.
I know, it's
because
sad.
we try and play with lots of different people and lots of different pods. So we like it, but we're trying to encourage you not to interrupt players while they're playing a game. You know, it's a very simple thing, but it's just wait till they're done.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you can think of when you're trying to get a game together? Any other do's and don'ts of your kitchen table etiquette? What else is there for you to offer for the
in terms of organizing?
Yeah,
pods,
organizing a game.
I think trying not to leave people out of games or avoid people is a really key thing. Like, of course, maybe sometimes you're in a situation, especially at game stores, where you might not entirely enjoy sitting down at a certain table with someone. Maybe it's because of the cards they play. Maybe it's because of their BO. Who knows? Like, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Maybe you just don't like sitting at that table with that person. It's okay, but try not to say things like, I don't want to play with this person. Especially publicly. It's one of those, it's just a social etiquette thing. Like, again, if you're in a business meeting at work, if you don't want to sit next to the person in the meeting room, you're not going to actively walk into the meeting room and be like, I don't want to sit next to Walt. I don't like his handwriting. Like, you're not going to say it. So same thought applies to organizing pods.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
I think there's one more thing that I want to talk about when organizing pods as well.
Yeah.
Is the Rule Zero conversation usually actually starts when you're trying to organize pods. Like, hey, I'm looking for a cash game, all that kind of stuff.
That's true.
Or I'm looking for a high-powered game.
Yeah, at the game store for sure. Yeah.
Definitely at the game store. I think when you say that, don't be like really aggressive with people that don't want to play that type of game, because people are looking for different games with Commander. It's a social thing.
Yeah.
I want to play CDH, so I'm going to go, hey, so let's say I want to play casual, and someone's like, I'd rather play high-powered. I'm like, all right, well, you're not the person for this pod. You know, like, it's totally fine to decline offers for games because it's not the game you're looking for.
Totally.
I think there's this... I'm going to sidetrack here. Speaking of TikTok, a while ago, there's this awesome person on TikTok that does this series called Doing Things That You Might Be Uncomfortable With to Show You They're Okay. That's the title of the series,
How
right?
sweet.
And this person does stuff that generally makes people uncomfortable or anxious. Like, for example, going into a shop and not buying anything. So for some people, that makes people really uncomfortable because it's part of this social contract that when you enter a store, you buy something. But it's okay to go in, see that you don't need anything or want anything, and leave.
Totally.
So this person does this incredible TikTok series of doing that kind of stuff, or like, eating dinner on their, or going to a restaurant on their own. They do that kind of stuff.
Wow.
It's a real... I'll send you the TikToks when we're done with this podcast.
No, that
it's
sounds
really gorgeous.
cool. If we can find the
if we can find the
we might link
creator,
him in the show notes. That sounds really sweet.
We'll link them in the show notes. They're awesome. But I think that maybe we could have a look at like doing some of that on our TikTok for Magic stuff. Like, doing Magic things that might make players uncomfortable to show you that they're okay.
Yeah. I mean, something I've really been enjoying about how some recent Magic the Gathering YouTubers have been going about making Commander games. Specifically, Prof is really good at this. Is they show an extended Rule Zero conversation.
That's awesome.
As part of the video. They don't just immediately start the game. There's obviously an appeal with immediately starting the game. Like, people like...
Get right into the action.
Yeah, well, game nights, for instance, is like all about the entertainment value.
Yeah.
It's a show more than it is the game, right? So it's like really important that they just get straight into it. That's totally fair. But if the point of your channel or your video is to show Commander and how fun it can be, I think you should include the Rule Zero. And honestly, the name of the series for Solarian Community College is Shuffle Up and Play. Highly recommend all the videos. I've had a lot of fun watching them.
There's some really funny ones in there as well, actually.
And I think he's really I was thinking about this the other day, it's really important what you name something. in terms of what it conveys about what someone can expect when they watch it. And he's called it Shuffle Up and Play. And I was like, how interesting. That immediately conveys this casual, like, we're just having fun. We're just going to, like, talk smack and play some games.
And there's also something that happens before the play, too. It's shuffle up and play.
Yeah,
like, there's
exactly.
that shuffle up mode. Yeah.
It's like a casual, it's like, it's like over tea. It's this nice thing. And he's like conveyed that perfectly in the games because it's like more the personalities and the chat they have than the games themselves.
I love that.
It's really cool.
I really love
cool.
it. I've watched a couple, but I might watch a little bit more.
Yeah.
I love how this podcast is also turning into like a review of other podcasts as well.
There's a lot of great stuff out there.
It is, and there is. And one more thing before we end the outside the game.
Sure.
Especially at the game store. Clean up once you leave.
Yeah.
It's simple, but
it's a good principle for life, honestly.
I think so too. And it works with Kitchen Table too. If you invited me over for games here, I would not leave rubbish on the table as I left.
No.
That is just not okay.
Just
so
rude.
why do it at the game store?
Yeah.
I know sometimes we slip up. We might, leave a Gatorade bottle there or a Coke can or something like that. But if you can, remember there are rubbish bins at game stores, just like everywhere else.
Yeah.
Pop your rubbish away. Especially magic packs as well. God, they get everywhere.
Oh, those wrappers are so good at like expanding and folding out until they're so enormous.
One magic case, like one magic booster box.
It's so tightly packed away.
But when you open one, my God, there's wrappers everywhere. It's like
You're
Christmas
drowning
morning.
Make a little like booster pack angel on the floor. Yeah,
God,
for sure.
Funny.
I'll actually like add a little principle that I kind of live my life by. You've probably heard like some people will say stuff like, I always like to leave things the way I left them, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, the way I found them.
Yeah.
Leave things the way I found them. So, if I go to someone's kitchen and I use it to cook, like, use the frying pan or whatever, I always try and put everything back where it was, right?
Yeah.
Leave things how you found them. I actually, personally in my life, and maybe this is hard for some people, but I extend it to, I like to leave things better than I found them.
That's taking the social contract and going, you know what? I'm a superhero and I'm going to make it better for society.
Well, like, an example, when I go to the gym, of people, anyone who goes to the gym a lot will know, some people just leave their stuff everywhere. Obviously, don't be one of those people.
It infuriates me when I stub my toe on a dumbbell that has just been
it's been left in the middle of like a walking section.
Yeah.
But what I do, if I like go to use a piece of equipment and sort of it's been left in this kind of state of disarray, or like the one thing you find a lot is it's already loaded up with a bunch of plates which you then have to like remove to get your plates on there.
Which I want to make a note, in the gym, really inconsiderate.
Yeah.
Because some people can't lift 45 kilo plates off a barbell.
Yeah.
Don't stop it.
No.
Stop. Anyone go, stop.
Stop it now. Well, but the thing that I will do is like, I won't leave it the way I found it, in that I won't leave it with the plates like loaded up again. I'll remove all the plates when I leave it.
That's
so,
really nice.
I found it with some plates on there. I actually leave it with some plates off it. I do the same with the dumbbells. I put them back exactly where they're supposed to go. It's just, it takes a little bit of effort in each interaction, but the overall net effect will be that you are like a positive influence on people.
And I'd like to put this in the terms of, Commander, how nice is it when you sit down at a table at a game store and it is clean as a whistle. It's been wiped down. There's no stickiness on the table from someone that's eaten before. That is a nice feeling.
Yeah, you just roll the playmat out and you're good to go.
How annoying is it when there's a blob of tomato sauce in the middle of the table?
It's true.
Just be considerate. There is a social contract for a reason, and it's because we're all trying to have fun and have an enjoyable experience playing Commander.
For sure. Well, look, playing Commander is something that we do socially. And so, of course, there is a social contract. And I think we've sort of covered, like, I actually quite like that last metaphor we've ended on, which is that you should leave things better than you found them. And so, likewise, you should take that little bit of positivity towards your interactions in a game, outside a game, when you're playing Commander. Try to leave people with, a little sense of something being better than what it was.
Well, the command itself for today's episode specifically says to ensure the success of the format. So let's leave this format better than we found it.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, well, Space Commanders, command received. That is something we are going to start doing, and I'm sorry you're going to have to put up with it.
I love how we have not rehearsed that, and the intonation was exactly the same.
That was incredible. We even both did a little salute as well.
This is something we're going to start doing because, boy, oh boy, we love our brand.
We do love our brand. It's true. It's true. Well, to the listeners, do you feel commanded? Because we definitely do. And what do you think of the social contract in Commander?
All right. Well, I'm really keen to read those comments, but usually we end our episodes with Play of the Week. Now, we're going to do something a little different today. We've done a lot of Magic talk today. We're about 1 hour and 20 minutes in terms of raw audio time. So I'm going to suggest we planeswalk out of here. See what I did there? Mechanicking.
Planeswalk out of here. Planeswalk out of here.
And we're gonna talk about something outside of the world of Commander, because we generally get asked by people at our local game store that listen to our podcast, and generally I think we should encourage Commander not be the be-all and end-all of our friendship.
Well, I think normally when you play, you end up talking about stuff that's outside of Commander anyway. So I like it.
Yeah, it shouldn't be the be-all and end-all of our relationship. So I'm going to bring up something that I've been really passionate about again recently.
Sure.
And you might wince because you know a little bit of my backstory on this, which is electric skateboards. Oh no, it's okay. Okay, I'm going to add a lot of clarity for those that don't know.
I like it. I like the electric skateboard. I like the James electric skateboards.
But,
you provide context.
But they are not... Look, they are really, really fun, but they are not a safe activity to do. Commander is a very low-risk activity. The worst injury you can probably get is a paper cut. Maybe a mild heart attack when someone does something.
Card damage.
Yeah, that's like the worst thing to happen. I don't know, you might wet a guy's cradle and lose money. But on an
you might trip and bleed on a card, James,
like in your
nightmares.
But electric skateboards can
the risks
go
are a bit higher.
Pretty quick, and your body is on the line. And about a year ago, to pretty much the month, I think it was in October, November that I did it.
Maybe a little bit later.
Yeah, I came off my electric skateboard at about 40 kilometers an hour and completely... PSA, trigger warning, medical gore may be described in the next couple of seconds.
We're not throwing up any photos on the YouTube channel, that's for sure.
Don't worry. If you want to see them and you see me in person, sure, ask. But I came off at 40k an hour and snapped my ankle and completely dislocated it and twisted it 180 degrees round my foot. And it resulted in me being... off my feet for 3 months. I couldn't walk for... I think I couldn't walk for 3.5 months. And then I was in physical therapy for about 4 months after that. And I did hydrotherapy in the pool.
It was a long process.
It was a long process. And Walt, bless him, I genuinely thank you for that period, because Walt would pick me up so I could still go to the game store. Oh, I
did too, yeah. We used to carpool every week. Yeah.
And I really, really do thank you for that. I remember I was so thankful. I just sent Walt a bulk sum of money once because I was like, all the fuel that you've spent.
Oh, you did? I remember seeing that. He was like, what? And then, right. Yeah, I suppose I've done a few of those.
Yeah, but regardless of the injury...
Yes, let's move past the injury.
I love... electric skateboards. I actually electronically skateboarded. Is that how you... I e-skated.
He's ski-boarded.
Skiddly dude over here. I e-skated here today. And I'm about 5, 6, 7k away, something like that. Not that far.
Yeah, it's like a 6-minute drive or something.
Yeah, not that far at all. So I e-skated over here, and it's really good fun. And I feel like Walt and I are both, Walt definitely more than I, but both environmentalists, both care about the environment. Electronic personal transportation, in my opinion, the future.
Yeah.
It's way less of a carbon footprint for transportation. It's funner. It's way more fun. And it's like, you can usually get places a little bit quicker. Because getting stuck in traffic's a pain in the ass, but if you're on a footpath, meow.
Well, I think even cars these days, most car manufacturers are phasing out the production of petrol vehicles. It'll take a long time before we're all driving electric cars, because obviously everyone's car has to cark it. Their current car that uses petrol.
My car is a 2010.
It's going to take a while for that to happen. But mostly car manufacturers are only manufacturing electric these days. So,
but I love electric skateboards. They're really fun. I actually now have a bit of a crew. I've got a couple of friends that have electric skateboards, and we meet up and we go on adventure rides. So we'll start at one point, we'll be like, all right, where do we want to go today? And we'll be like, all right, let's get to St. Kilda. And we'll go,
Damn.
yeah, and we just like, so, and then it's public transport. So like, we'll skate to a certain point, get on a train, get into the city, and then from Flinders Street, we'll go down to St Kilda on the boards.
That's so cool.
And it's really cute. Then we're like, oh, boards are running out of juice. Let's find a cafe and we'll have a coffee, catch up, and charge the boards.
This explains why sometimes when I'm like, hey, James, can we hang out today? He's like, sorry, I'm going electric skateboarding. And in my head, I'm like, what? For the rest of the day? This explains it.
It's a whole day activity. It's great. Usually we'll meet up in a park at like 10, something like that. And we'll go out and, because the boards will generally die power-wise after about a couple of hours of riding. So you find a cafe, charge up, go back.
That sounds
really
great.
good fun.
If I had the moolah, I'd probably join you.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, they're not cheap. My board itself was around 2,000. For those interested, I have an Evolve Series 1 GTR. And it's around about $2,000 market price.
I have ridden it. It's very good fun. Like, I can definitely attest to that. Yeah.
One of my friends, though, has just bought... well, he's partially building it because he used to work for the company that manufactures them. So he gets it. He's getting it for a lot cheaper price. But you ready for this? It's cost... This board commercially to sell is $4,500.
Oh.
And that's not even the cheapest one they make, which is wild. But this one has, like... On each corner, on each wheel, it's got an independent motor. And I think they're about 3,000 watts of power. Like a lot of power behind each wheel. And independent suspension on each wheel. Suspension.
What?
It's a car. It's literally a car. It's a 4-wheel drive car that he stands on and flies at about... His goes like 50 kilometers an hour.
Well, that makes sense because the price is roughly equivalent to a second-hand car. So
mental, absolutely mental. But there you go.
Cool.
Planeswalk to the world of electric skateboards, and they're awesome.
Nice. I look forward to our next hurrah. Maybe we can visit Zendikar or something.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the next Planeswalk activity.
Right.
Well, you can organize our next Planeswalk.
Sounds good. Well, thanks so much for listening, everybody, and it's so good to be back. You can expect another episode about 2 weeks after this one. We can't wait to bring it to you.
So keen. And again, we always love talking to you guys that listen, so please comment, subscribe. Now, that's something we should say.
We should say subscribe.
Subscribe. Hit that bell.
Hit the bell. Zoom.
Link, click.
LinkedIn.
Scroll. Twitter.
Twiddle.
Twiddle
us. Twiddle us good.
Anyway, we'll end the episode there. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Goodbye, Commander players.
Goodbye.